Good evening. My name is Barry Kitterman, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to this evening's webinar with our guest, the author Bill Konigsberg. This event is brought to you by the Center of Excellence for the Creative Arts and the Creative Writing Program at Austin Peay. I want to thank everyone who is watching this evening, whether you're here in Clarksville or somewhere quite far away. I wish we were all together in one room. I wish we were sitting next to each other and greeting each other. But this whole universe had other plans for us this year. And as often as I have cursed my computer of late, I'm also very grateful to everyone who has provided technical support to us here at APSU since the advent of these coronavirus days. So thank you. I first learned of Bill Konigsberg's work online, the way we are doing most of our learning these days. I was led to a website where Bill was speaking very passionately about the need for justice and compassion in dealing with young people, in this case, with gay and lesbian and bisexual and transgendered young people. This is work I support wholeheartedly and without reservation, so I listened to what Bill Konigsberg had to say. Bill comes to the world of writing fiction by first being a sports writer and moving from that area of writing into the writing of young adult fiction, what you may hear referred to as YA fiction. One of my students asked me recently, what exactly makes a story a young adult story rather than just a mainstream story? A mainstream story that has a young set of characters. Now, that's a fascinating question that Bill could address with more authority than I can. But maybe it's at least partly a question of audience. Who does the author see as their readers? And in his first books, I think Bill has known that his audience is young people. And to no small extent, young people who are struggling through those battles about their sexuality, battles with family and friends, sometimes with people who aren't friends at all, and most importantly, with themselves. He set out to provide stories and protagonists who are both young and gay. And in this respect, he has been doing something very important. So we have these genres when it comes to fiction. We have science fiction and romance fiction, detective fiction and historical fiction, and we have young adult fiction. But at the end of the day, as readers, what we want is a good story well told. It will come as no surprise to you that I'm not a young adult, but I am a fan of Bill Konigsberg's fiction. I've been able to read a few pages from his newest book, The Bridge. I think it's a terrific opening, and I can't wait to get my copy. Bill Konigsberg is the award-winning author of 6 young adult novels. He's a recipient of the Penn Center USA Literary Award and the Stonewall Book Award, the Sid Fleischman Award for Humor. He's been a finalist for the Amelia Elizabeth Walden Award and the Lambda Literary Award. In 2018, the National Council of Teachers of English, the NCTE's Assembly on Literature for Adolescents, established the Bill Konigsberg Award for Acts and Activism for Equity and Inclusion through young adult literature. Bill, you'll have to imagine the rousing and heartfelt round of applause we are extending to you right now as we welcome you to our campus. Bill Konigsberg.
Wow, thank you so much. Really, it's a bunch of people to thank. I have to just say up front, I so wish that I was there. I so wish that I was able to be with you today in Tennessee rather than in Phoenix, Arizona, where it is 100 degrees. But I will do my best to be present with you virtually. Up front, I just want to thank the folks at Zone 3 Press and the Center of Excellence for the Creative Arts for sponsoring the event, and specifically Dr. Cruz, Dr. Spofford, and Dr. Wright. And I would like to thank Barry Kitterman for getting the ball rolling on this visit. So these virtual visits are, they're a lifesaver for writers like me, but, to be honest, they do have kind of a strange impact on me. Talking to a screen and not being able to see and connect to an audience is something I have to admit I find very difficult. So, I'm going to just do my best today, and hopefully through the Q&A we can connect in some way or another. I'd like to start by telling you a little bit. I think the way that this will go is that I will tell you a little bit more about myself as a writer, and then I will read a little bit from the new book, The Bridge, and I'll talk to you about what that book is about and how that book works. It's really a departure for me. So a lot of the stuff that Barry Kitterman just said about me is more about my first 5 books, although it's complicated. Anyway, and after that, we'll take some questions. So, oh, I do want to do one thing. You know, Barry mentioned a question that was asked of him in a classroom about what makes young adult literature, and I have a quick answer for that. One thing is Stephen Colbert, upon interviewing a young adult writer once, basically summed it up pretty perfectly. He said, young adult literature is comprised of books that people actually read. So I don't know if that's maybe a little anti-intellectual, but the truth is that our books are very well read, and it's a very different genre than people might think of if they're older and thinking about young adult literature from their childhood. I did read Judy Blume and books like that, and they were fantastic books, but the genre has grown incredibly, and people are doing some really special writing in young adult. And the only thing that makes a book a young adult book is that the protagonist is a teenager. Some books are marketed as literary novels, even though they meet that criteria, but that's really a marketing choice. Most books will be marketed as young adult because the audience is so large for that right now. Okay, so what can I tell you? I grew up in New York City. I grew up in the 1980s, and perhaps the most, I was certainly somebody who loved to write from very young. I love to tell stories, and I love to express myself through writing. From very young, I would say from my about 13 or 14, I started to realize that I was gay. This was very confusing to me. It was the 1980s. It was a very different time. And I couldn't really reconcile all the things about me together. I couldn't reconcile the fact that I was a big sports fan and I played sports all the time. And that wasn't something that, all I knew about being gay were the stereotypes that were out there. And I didn't really match those stereotypes very well. So consequently, my life was very confusing and very lonely from that time. And I think probably that served to make me the writer that I am, because I have a lot of things to say. I always say we write from the white hot center of our lives. And for me, those years, 14, 15, 16, 17, were definitely the white hot center of my life, where I felt things very acutely. So I went to college and I was a writing major. However, a teacher of mine at Columbia, where I went to school, told me that you can't make any money as a fiction writer. And that's true. But unfortunately, it did also stop me from doing that right away. I didn't think it was a possibility for me to write books. So I looked into other directions. I became a sports writer. And I think the bottom line is that I wanted to do something where I'd be paid for writing. And I loved writing sports. I also did some other kinds of journalism, which I didn't like as well. But something definitely felt like it was missing. And during that time, I'm going to leave some of this. I'm sorry, I talked about myself a fair amount in these talks, and oftentimes I would speak here about my battles with depression, but I'm going to hold off and just let you know that I have struggled with depression in my life, and that matters because of the last book that I've written called The Bridge. But anyhow, about the age of 31, I decided to do 2 things. The first thing I decided to do, I was working at ESPN at the time, and I decided to come out of the closet. I was working at ESPN, and there was an article about, I guess it was written by the executive editor of Out magazine wrote an article about his alleged boyfriend who was a major league ball player. And all of the sports writers around the country, this was 2001, went crazy with this story and wanted to talk about what would happen if there was an openly gay baseball player. And I was sitting there in Bristol, Connecticut, watching this happen. I was not out because there were no out people, out men, I should say, in sports at the time. And I was watching this conversation and I realized I had something to say. So I wrote an essay and it was called Sports World Still a Struggle for Gays. I wrote it in about 10 minutes, brought it into my boss, sat down in a chair while he read it. And I didn't know what was going to happen. I didn't really think much about it, but it turned out he finished reading it. He looked up at me and he said, I think we should put it on the front page of ESPN.com. So that's what wound up happening at ESPN in 2001. And it's how I came out of the closet very publicly. That changed my life. I think there were some concerns at the time from ESPN and the higher ups there who I had bunch of meetings with in the 3 days between writing that and it appearing about, was I ready for this? And what if I got death threats, or what if my family did? And I basically said, if you have my back, I'm in. And turned out that that didn't happen at all. I got a lot of support and love. And that article won a GLAAD Media Award and changed my life, because suddenly I was the gay guy working in sports. And that was wonderful. But the other thing that happened in 2001 is I realized that's not who I wanted to be. That I was glad to be making some changes and helping people in the world, but I was really not wanting to write as a journalist, that's not who I am. And in fact, I wasn't a very good journalist. My most famous piece of journalism was an article about myself, which tells you something about me as a journalist. Anyhow, that year I decided to go to grad school for creative writing at Arizona State University, and I began to write books. And what I can tell you about my books is that, generally speaking, a judgment call here, I'm a selfish writer. I tend to write about myself in various ways. I'm always in my books working something out about myself. I'm somebody who believes deeply in authenticity, and not in authenticity, but in authenticity. It's very important to me, the question of who am I and what am I here for? And so, in fact, my very first novel, Out of the Pocket, which was released in 2008, I started writing in 2003, was a novel about a football player was in the closet because there were no openly gay football players at the time, and tells him the word gets out and he is outed against his will at his high school, and that becomes a national story. So as you can see there, while I wasn't a football player, I had taken my experience at ESPN and turned it into a young adult novel. I think the important takeaway from that in some ways is that I spoke the teenage voice. It came very naturally for me. At the time when I started writing that book, I was 32. I'm much older than that now. But at the time I was 32, and I think I just heard that voice and felt that sort of burning anxiety and loneliness about being the only gay person. And that's how I felt as a teen. And it just came naturally. So that became the genre I wrote. Out of the Pocket at the time in 2008, when Penguin released it, was a niche title. It was hard to get that book published. Having a book with a gay protagonist was a big deal back then. There were not so many in young adult literature. The year that came out, there were, I think, 30 such books out of maybe 1,500 books total and being published in YA mainstream literature. So there were only about 30 books up for what's called the Lambda Literary Award, and that year I won, which was a delight. It was not a very good selling book or anything like that, but it was a well-received book. After that book, I really didn't want to be that guy who wrote 50 stories about gays in sports. I really had enough writing that about Out of the Pocket. So I was looking for another book and I couldn't really find it. I had this idea and I was calling it No Place Like Home. It was supposed to be like The Wizard of Oz, but gayer. Like, that was my very bad idea. And I was writing about a boy who goes across the country to an all-boys boarding school. He's already out and he decides to go back in the closet. And I wasn't really sure what I was doing or why I was writing that, you a quick story. I was living, when I was writing the book, I was living in Billings, Montana. First of all, don't live in Billings, Montana. Second of all, I used to play racquetball, and I would go to this place to play racquetball pickup games with strangers on Wednesdays at a gym. And I wear this ring, as you see. I'm now currently married to my partner since 2013. But at that time, 2009, I had a civil union with Chuck, marriage 1.0 or whatever you want to call it. And that was what was legal at the time. So a man who I was playing with saw the ring and he said, "Oh, you're married." And I said, "Yep." And he said, "What's your wife's name?" And I got really sort of frustrated. I was struggling with this book, and I'm frustrated because I'm thinking, I just want to play racquetball. I don't really want to have a political or social discussion with somebody who may very well be homophobic. I have no way of knowing. But I'm not a liar. I'm not going to lie about it. And I just, in a quick moment, I thought, her name is Rachel, I said. And we kept playing, and I got in my car afterwards, and I thought, what is happening to me? What just happened that made me, a very honest person, lie about my sexual orientation when I'm out, and a rather famous gay person in a way? And it was at that moment that the book Openly Straight, my second novel, was born, because I began to understand what I was writing about. I was writing about this boy who's going across the country to recreate himself without the label gay. And what that was really about for me was what I like to now call gay fatigue, or gay fatigue if you're French, which is better. Anyway, gay fatigue is just the idea that straight people don't really understand how hard it is that we have to, on a daily basis, make the decision to come out. That coming out isn't a one-time thing if you're LGBTQIA+. It's an everyday thing, and it's unfair. And so I wrote this book about a kid who, not exactly go back into the closet, but just decides not to talk about it, thinking that maybe it'll just be okay to not mention his sexual orientation. But that's not the way the world works. Because of heterosexism, people tend to assume you're straight unless otherwise you say something. So that's what that's about. And Openly Straight, to this point, has been my best-selling book. It's been around for a while, and it's something of a cult classic out there. In fact, the book Simon versus the Homo Sapiens Agenda really is a book that kind of comes from somebody who was a big fan. Becky Albertalli was a big fan of Openly Straight. Fat lot of good that does to me. She has the millions, but that's okay. Anyway, that it's a funny book, and it deals with a topic there that I don't think, labels, that we don't really talk that much about. What I found out after that book was that everyone in the world seemed to think that I had written a romance when I had written a coming of age story. I had intended to write this book as a story about this boy, Rafe, coming of age when he makes this decision. But everybody saw a romance in the book and just fell in love with his romance with this character, Ben, who is a straight boy. When the book ends and there's no definitive, spoiler alert, when there's no definitive ending in terms of their relationship, I would get emails that would say things like, "Bill, I love you and I hate you," or "I finished this book and I threw it across the room." And so it was decided that my standalone novel, Openly Straight, would become a series of 2 novels. And the second book, Honestly Ben, picks up where the first one leaves off, and is really about, it's from the other point of view, the point of view of the other boy, Ben, who is the straight boy. And it's really about a straight boy who falls in love with a gay boy. And it's about, I would say, different kinds of love and what love can mean to different people. Anyhow, the other book that I wrote right around that time was called The Porcupine of Truth. The Porcupine of Truth really was my 3rd novel, because Honestly Ben became my 4th. And that book was about, I like to say it this way, I wanted to, how do I put this? I was somebody who grew up in a very non-spiritual, non-religious household. I was told at a very young age that believing in God or having questions about God was a weakness. And as I grew up, I found myself very interested in the cosmic mystery and what the universe was about. And I found myself also very spiritual. And so in some ways, what The Porcupine of Truth is a book that means to reclaim spirituality for an LGBTQIA plus audience. It's my way of saying the cosmic mystery is for all of us, and you don't get to control, that this is not our area because of the religious right or what have you. So that was a quite controversial book, but it's a book that I stand behind today. I think it was a real love or hate book. It was also the book that won 2 major awards, and I think it's because it's that book that garners very strong opinions. Finally, book 5, the 5th book I wrote is called The Music of What Happens, and this was the first time that I wrote a book that was really about, it was a gay romance on purpose, I say, as opposed to Openly Straight and Honestly Ben, which I didn't mean to write a romance. It's about 2 boys, Max and, oh my God, did I just forget my characters' names? Oh my God. Oh, it's good, this is being recorded, wonderful. It's about 2 boys in Arizona who fall in love while working on a food truck one summer. And really what that book is about is toxic masculinity. It's something that I was thinking a lot about. I was working at that time with Boys, an organization called Boys to Men, which is national and international. And that organization is basically there to help boys learn how to talk and learn how to understand their emotions. We'd go into schools and sit in circles with the boys. And I came to understand the power during that time of a sort of a toxic masculinity in which men are told to kind of suck it up. Men don't cry. Men have basically two emotions are available to men in this world, and that's anger and joy. And I thought, maybe we ought to have some more. So that's what that book is about. And then I wrote this book, The Bridge, which is my newest book. It just came out in September. And The Bridge is a total departure for me. The Bridge is about 2 teens, a boy and a girl, both 17, who meet on top of the George Washington Bridge. I want to just stop for a moment and just give a trigger warning, because I understand that these things can be challenging for some people. I will tell you that this is done in a very sensitive way, but this book is about suicide. So if that is something that you cannot listen to, I understand, and you have been warned. Anyhow, I'm somebody who has suffered from chronic depression in my life. This book is about these 2 teens who meet on top of the George Washington Bridge with the intention to jump, and they don't know each other and they interrupt each other. And based then on what happens the moment that they sit 100 feet apart, both with one leg over the railing, the world then splits into 4 different realities. It's 4 different stories, 1, 2, 3, 4. In the first story, the girl jumps and the boy doesn't. And we get the aftermath of the boy's decision not to jump, as well as we meet the girl's family and see the impact of her choice. In the second story, after that story is done, we go right back to that same first moment. And this time, the boy jumps and the girl doesn't. It's a really challenging moment because we now know and love this boy, and the story ends and suddenly he's jumped to his death. And so we get to see the impact on his family, and we get to see more about the girl and why she jumped in the first place. The third story, they both jump. And the book goes deep into the future, where we get a sense of we get a sense of all of the people whose lives have been impacted by the lack of these 2 people in the world. And that's a shorter section. And then in the 4th section, they both decide not to jump. And in that story, the 2 of them create a connection that is life-changing and life-saving for both of them. And really what this book is about is those moments for any of us who have felt suicidally depressed. And I did attempt suicide at 27, in fact. I remember that moment where I felt like it wouldn't matter if I was alive or not, that the world wouldn't care and there would be no impact. And so really what I wanted to get at is how that's a lie and how our brains tell us a lie. So a couple comments. As you see, that's a big difference. The boy in the book is gay. But instead of suddenly writing another book about LGBTQIA plus issues, this book really isn't about that. And I think the reason for that is that I really felt like I had said a lot about those issues already, and I think in some ways I was tired. And secondly, I felt like I had something to say about the issue of suicide and depression. I had seen the movie 13 Reasons Why, I had read the book, and I felt while it's a good book and a good show, I don't think that it's a very helpful or good representation of depression and suicide in terms of being helpful for young people and frankly older people. I think it treats suicide in a way that's a little bit too sexy, a little bit too alluring. And so this book does the opposite of that. I think what people tend to say about it is that it feels extraordinarily real, and that's what I wanted. It's in fact a book about hope, but you have to get to the hope part because there's some darkness along the way. Anyhow, the good news that I will tell you without going into detail, and I won't answer questions about this, but it does look like we're going to option this for a limited series with a big network. So that's very exciting for me because I think this would be a neat movie. And now what I'd like to do real quick is I'd like to read you short snippets from each of the 4 sections of this book so that you can get a sense of my writing style and also how different each of those are. So what I'm going to read is first from the first story, the moment after Tilly, the girl, jumps. This is Aaron. Aaron running down the stairs of the bridge and dealing with what he has just seen. He runs back to Manhattan, down the winding, rotting metal staircase. He runs because if he's not there, then none of this ever happened. He can try to be normal and make this a normal Wednesday. He sees her falling. He can't stop seeing her fall. He can't stop her from falling. He wants to stop it. He wants it to stop. He wants to stop everything, except apparently his life. When he gets to the park on 178th, he numbly walks east toward the subway. He replays the back of her sad head as she walked over to the spot. Her sobs, her eyes that he couldn't see clearly then, he sees them clearly now. He starts to ask himself, what kind of person jumps? And then he thinks, oh, right. He puts his earphones back in, taking the time to graze his ear with his finger. It feels spiritual almost. This skin, these organs, alive, unalive, the fine edge between the two. It could have happened so easily. He knows it. If she hadn't shown up and taken his place, this living ear is never again touched by human fingers. It never again hears music, never again hears anything. He felt it, the momentum that would have ended with a splash and oblivion. He shouldn't be here anymore. He captures every detail of this scene, savors every single thing that he can still sense as an alive person. It all feels so tentative, this edge between living and dying, and he tunes into the way the breeze, gentler down here off the bridge, brushes through his hair. He begins to laugh, sob, hyperventilate. He bends at the waist and tries to expel this crazy, pent-up energy from everywhere it's been hiding in his body, behind his eyes, his toenails, every inch of his skin. So that's from the first section. And what I want to give you is a little bit from the second section. And really what I was writing about here, what I'm dealing with here is in some ways the butterfly effect and also the huge impact of these choices. Let me talk more about that rather than butterfly, because that's more important here. If I can find it. Where is this? Got it. Okay. So this scene that I'm about to read is from the very same moment in reality, except in this reality, in this alternate reality, Tilly this time doesn't jump and Aaron does. So this is her experience in that same moment. She squeezes her eyes shut. She cannot watch him fall. When she hears the most distant of clacks, she keeps her eyes locked shut. What? What just happened? She is so stupid. She walked past the kid who was about her age, and she thought he was like a poet or a painter, looking out at the city, memorizing it for his art. That's seriously the thought she had because she was so fixated on her own crap. Stupid and selfish, she thinks. She should have said something and it would have made him not do that. So selfish. Also, totally not going to jump now. Who jumps off the George Washington Bridge second? She slowly walks toward the spot where the boy was just a minute ago. She feels dizzy, like the time she was mugged when she was 8. An outsized thing has happened and her body doesn't know how to react. It's so weird to her. It's so random. If she'd come an hour earlier, she'd be dead. Now she isn't, but this stranger is. It's like he saved her life, kind of, because in the echo of that distant clack, she can't really imagine. Was she actually going to drown in the Hudson, where it's so cold? She puts her hand on the dilapidated rail, approximating where the boy's hand was. No spot is particularly warmer than any other. It's like he was a ghost. There are no signs of his existence in the hard-blowing wind. If she leaves and doesn't say anything, no one will ever know. Boy evaporated. He was looking right at her. Before he jumped, they were staring at each other. She was the last person he saw on Earth. She is so not worthy of that role. All right, so that was the second section, and I'm now going to jump to the very short same moment of the third section. These are the words that start the third section. It is a terrible ballet. Like amateur dancers choreographed poorly by an uncaring God, they tilt out toward the blue unknown and lose their balance. And falling, they, time's up for conjecture, casual musing, forever. Wind rushing through hair and popping eardrums, and the girl turned upside down and she tries to reach her hand back to grasp, but it's far too late for that, and her body breaks upon impact. The boy, inverted to the world, a quick glimpse of New Jersey. What a final vision. The word fly, followed by the incomplete concept of. And finally, I'm going to take you to a happier place now. Thank you for putting up with me in this book. This is in the fourth section after they both decide not to jump and they walk down from the bridge. What they actually wind up doing for a bunch of different reasons is going to get donuts and coffee. And they have now left the donut shop. And this is what happens. Tilly is thinking that it's not enough. Donuts and coffee with someone random isn't enough. She half hopes he'll say, well, it was nice meeting you. I guess I'll see you around, so that she can go back to the bridge and finish what she started. And she's half petrified that he'll say that, and she'll have to figure out how to not follow through. The pull is so strong, but there's this fierce, small part of her that doesn't want to die, who just knows she can't die. They walk aimlessly down Fort Washington, retracing their steps from the bridge. As they transverse the underpass of the George Washington Bridge bus station, a sense of utter doom closes in on Aaron. This is it. He tried, he failed. Time to exit Mundi. He stops walking. So, he says. Tilly looks at the ground and puts her hands in her coat pockets. So, he says, I guess. Tilly swallows. She's not sure what he guesses, but she knows it's the end. Of what, she isn't sure. Their acquaintance? Their world? Are they both going to the bridge? Together, will they take turns? Go one at a time? Cold water. She shivers. She's not at all ready for an ending. They are interrupted. Have you heard the good news? An old white woman with too bright orangey lipstick asks them. She has a red and brown knit cap pulled down so low that she almost doesn't have eyes. She smells of too much perfume. Tilly and Aaron look at each other and they break out laughing. The woman flinches, a tentative smile disappearing from her face. Aaron steps forward and stretches his arms down, hands open, as if he wants to catch something the woman is about to throw at him that will change his life. Tell me, he says, please, I need some fucking good news. The woman smiles politely. Okay now, she says, retreating. No need to. No, seriously, Aaron says. This isn't a day for just good news. It has to be incredible. And yes, I mean fucking incredible. Don't pardon my language. So lay it on me, lovely woman of good news. Tell me, please. The woman walks away, shaking her head. Tilly looks at Aaron like he's a stranger. Where did that come from? I don't know, Aaron says. It just felt right in the moment. I really did want the good news, by the way. I wanted it to be all Jesus-y good news, and then I wanted her to tell her that I'm an unrepentant gay boy and see her head explode. Tilly laughs. Okay, she says, I get that. Feel like walking, Aaron says. I suddenly feel like walking all the way downtown, or Downertown. Where do you live? They start walking. Upper East Side, Tilly says. I'm Upper West. Praise the fucking Lord. You're a little weird, aren't you? Tilly says. I'm a lot weird, Aaron says. Good. I'm weird too. Amen to that, Aaron says. Let's be two weird people walking down through Washington Heights, speaking only of light things. I have no more heavy in me. Deal, Tilly says. So anyway, that is the fourth part of the bridge. Anyway, I can take my glasses off now. I think at this point, it would be a great idea to take some questions if we could. I'm happy to answer questions about anything, about writing, you name it. Nothing's off topic or off the board anyway.
Hi, Bill. I think that Janice is going to unspotlight you and make this a little bit more of a conversation, but we do have our first question, and that is, a lot of your inspiration seems to come from personal experience. Do you have opportunities to meet and discuss current issues with LGBTQIA teens?
Teens? Yes, I've had, and yes. I've taken many of those opportunities. In fact, instead of a tour for the Porcupine of Truth, which is now a few years ago, I guess 2017 or 15, I can't remember. It's one of those years. I actually went across the South and into the Midwest and met with LGBTQIA plus youth groups along the way. And the idea was to talk to them. It was actually it was a benefit for the Trevor Project. And it was a really eye-opening experience for me because one of the things that I'm learning is that the world for young LGBTQIA plus people is very different now than it was when I was of age. And it doesn't mean it's better or worse, it's just different. I like to say in some ways, it matters what house you knock, whatever door you knock on. I mean, some kids have it really hard and a lot of kids don't have it quite as hard. But one thing that was really helpful was, I think I was actually in Nashville when I got a youth group there, gave me a really, really good opportunity to learn about transgender issues because those weren't the issues that I grew up with. And it was so interesting to listen to them and to really hear. I didn't know much about gender fluidity until that talk. I guess that was now 5 years ago, 2015. But what an opportunity. And I think every chance I have to listen to young people, all the better. Anything else coming? If not, I can yammer.
Yes, we have another question. How did you settle on writing the story with all 4 possible outcomes? Can you speak about that process?
The reason that I wrote it with all 4 possible outcomes was really to get at that idea of options. because in that moment, when somebody is depressed, when I've been depressed, it feels like there are no options. And I really wanted to get into that place where we could see every possible thing that would happen in a moment where somebody, I mean, depression is an illness. It's a mental illness, and one that I understand in many ways. In that moment, the brain tells us that there are no options. And I just hoped maybe if I wrote it this way, maybe one person might be up on that bridge one day and think of this book and think, okay, so there's a choice here. Yeah.
There is, yes.
Okay.
So do you know what your next book will address or will include? And can you speak to that?
Sure. I'm working on a book right now that takes place in 1987 in New York. And I think the reason that I'm doing that is just what I said about it being so different. I think I really want to go and visit the place where I came of age, because also I'm beginning to lose a little, I hate to say this, it's such bad marketing for me, but it's true. In some ways, I'm beginning to lose the modern voice, and I want to go back and I want to deal with the issues that I was dealing with back then. So really the backdrop of this novel is AIDS, is the AIDS crisis. And so I guess in some ways, writing about suicide, I decided to write something darker. I mean, I don't know what I was thinking, but it's been a tough write. It's been very hard to write. Oh, it's called Destination Unknown.
We do have another question, and this is actually one that I like to ask as well. What advice do you have for people who are just starting to get into writing, or who want to start getting into writing?
I think in one way, one of the major things I'd say is to stop thinking about product. I think that, you know, so often when people start writing, they start thinking about what's going to happen. And am I going to get published? And will this happen? Will that happen? It's a very challenging industry, and it doesn't mean, like I was told, you can't make money. There are ways to make money, but I think the most important thing to do is to focus on the words. And what I have experienced as both a teacher of writing and as a writer is it is absolutely true that we get better the more we write. And so there are pages that need to be written in order to get to something else. So focus on sitting down and being in the chair. And certainly, I know that you guys have a minor in it, right? You have a minor in creative writing?
We do, and we're working on a major right now as well.
Oh, fantastic. I mean, it's so valuable. The MFA program that I was in, I cannot tell you, I mean, I think you probably know. I mean, did you go to an MFA program?
I did, yeah. And it was one of the best experiences in my life.
Oh my God, for me too. It was so powerful. And I went in with the wrong idea. I went in thinking, well, I'm 31. I'll just use this opportunity to write. I won't get social with people. No, I had to go there and do the MFA thing. And I learned so much more than I thought I would. So.
Right. There's all the non-academic parts of it too, right? But that helps frame who you are as a writer and help you develop your voice. So we have another question. Let me see. In your novels, do you address how non-LGBTQIA+ people respond to LGBTQIA+ culture?
I think I do. I mean, I think that it's something that's hard to miss in some ways, because so much of the world is non-LGBTQIA+, that we're always dealing with reaction. And that's one of the things about being from any sort of minority group, is that it's always framed against a majority. So, you know, I think that I like to go against the grain in some ways with this stuff. It's just the way that I'm built. So I have a moment in The Bridge that's probably not what you would expect. So Aaron is gay in the book, and he has a moment with the vice principal at school who takes him into the office, and he knows that Aaron has been depressed, and he basically says, listen, we are a very inclusive school. You know, if anybody's been bullying you, and what Aaron says is, well, that's really nice, but no, like I'm not depressed because I'm gay. I'm depressed and I'm gay, which is very different. And so I think there are, especially in 2020, so many really outstanding allies who want to do good. And so that's something that I'm always looking at.
Thank you. We have a question. I'm going to try to combine them because we got a couple questions like this. And so I apologize in advance if my combining is a little bit awkward. But going back to the situation where you were playing squash and being asked about just being assumed that you had a wife. This is also related to the book Openly Straight and what you were saying about people assuming heterosexuality. Would you speak to that concept of assumed heterosexuality, and then maybe speak to, I guess, how we can encourage people to be more aware of their assumptions that everyone is straight?
Yeah, I think it's such an important topic, and it's one also that has shifted in the years since I wrote that book. I mean, it's been 12 years or 11 years since I wrote it. I can tell you how it felt at that time. And of course, I was in Montana, it was 2009. That may be a more straight culture than some other places, who knows? But it always felt, I'll give you an example. It's that moment when you sit on an airplane. Remember when we used to go on airplanes and you'd sit next to somebody and they start talking. And I'm a social person. I love to talk to people. But what people who are not gay don't understand is that there's a risk involved, inherent in being honest. I've been told, I remember being, I'm jumping all over the place, but it's all important. I remember being in the New York Mets locker room when I was a sports writer. I was about to leave the Associated Press where I was working and go, my first book was coming out and all of this kind of stuff. Because I went back and was a sports writer after that. I'm sorry, I'm all over the place. The point was, I said that a book of mine was coming out, and this guy said, oh, you know, he's a sports writer. We used to talk once in a while. I said, oh, what's it about? And I said, well, it's about a gay high school football player, blah, blah, blah. And he looked at me and he said, why would you write about that? And I said, oh, well, because I'm gay and I wanted to explore blah, blah, blah. And he said, he stiffened up and he said, oh, well, that's kind of, you know, that's a lot of information. You know, I didn't really, you know, ask you about your sexual orientation. And of course, that's a very strange reaction for me because in some ways he had. But I think a lot of people who are uncomfortable with gay people like to make it sound like we're trying to talk to them about our private business when in fact it's not private at all. You know, who I live with, who I'm married to is every bit as public as anything else. And so I do think in some ways that I just waved out the window while talking to you on screen. That's terrible. Bad job, Bill. I think, you know, it would be really great if straight people could understand that it's not the same as being straight, that we put ourselves out there and we have to. And also that if we don't, we wind up becoming liars. It's something that people don't understand. We get all of these conversations, let's say we don't tell somebody we're gay, and then we do. Often the answer is, you know, oh, I'm upset you didn't tell me. It's kind of like you can't win. I don't know, did that answer the question or was I just rambling, or both?
I think both, but rambling in a very good way.
Okay.
I think it did. You know, I think the second part really, like how can we encourage people to be more aware? That's also putting a lot on you to say, like, hey, here's a tool for how to not be a jerk about somebody, right?
Well, like it's the same thing, you know, we're beginning to do things for trans folks where we're giving people our pronouns. And I think there's a reason for that. I think that a lot of people aren't quite understanding yet that the reason that allies are saying my pronouns are he and him is because it's on a daily basis challenging for people who are trans to have to deal with that on their own. And so it's like saying I'm with you. And I think the same thing can be done about LGB issues, where you can simply say, do you have a partner? Do you have a significant other? Because it really makes a difference. I still get, do you have a wife? I am nearly 50 years old. I've been gay for 30 some years. And it makes me almost laugh because I think, I get why you're saying that, but no, I don't. And it sounds like you think I should.
Yeah, the idea of moving away from very heterosexual language, right?
Normative. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
So we have a few other questions. I'm going to ask them a little bit out of order, so I apologize to the people asking the questions, but this newest one is sort of a follow-up to what we were just talking about. Do you think it is important for there to be stories written with gay characters where being gay isn't a big deal within this story? Meaning that in the same way that many stories with straight characters don't make a big thing that they're straight.
Yes, I mean, that's such a great question, and it's so important. And in fact, the first book that I wrote like that is The Music of What Happens, my 5th novel. And people noticed it because in some ways it was a new thing that that some writers are doing, because we were so focused on coming out stories. But in fact, there are so many other things that go on in people's lives. And sometimes the sexual orientation is not what the book is about. So for the first time, I wrote a book about 2 characters who happen to be out, comfortably so, have families who are supportive. And this isn't a book about being gay. It's about needing a job for the summer. And I think that's, for me, having grown up in the world that I grew up in, I think it's a revelation. You know, I think it's a matter of us catching up to heterosexual culture and being welcomed in some ways. And I think that we are being. I think that the change in the last 12 years in this country on LGBTQ issues it's so momentous, it's hard to imagine. You know, I am so much more comfortable today, even if I'm living in a purple state. I know that people, you know, are more or less willing to accept me who I was.
So we have 2 more questions, and these are about your writing process, really. And I'm just going to combine them. So we have, what does a day of writing look like for you? And then what do you do to finish a project? So do you have any projects that are just sort of lingering or that you sort of abandoned? And what motivates you to finish those?
Yeah.
Maybe as part of your writing practice.
So the way that my writing practice looks on a daily basis is that I start early. And my favorite way of putting it is that it's like jumping in the pool before you're ready. If you sit on the edge of the pool, your brain will tell you 50 different reasons why you shouldn't write. And I should say I shouldn't write. I'm a hack. I don't know how to write a sentence, blah, blah, blah. All of these things come up. What I do, frankly, it's disgusting, but I will start writing before I brush my teeth. I will get out of bed and I will sit down. I write on a computer and I'll just start writing because it's before my brain can tell me not to. And what I need to do to get going is I have to get going. There's no way around it. I can't fool myself into anything other than getting my ass in the chair and starting writing. In terms of the other thing, how do I finish a project? It can be really hard to finish a project. And I tend to pick up steam towards the end of a project generally, but I'll tell you that right now I'm having the hardest time. And if I'm having trouble with something, I don't know that this is what I would say as a writing teacher, but it's what I would say honestly as a writer. Oftentimes, if I can't finish something, it means that there's something that's not right. that I've made a choice somewhere along the way that isn't working for me. And I'll tell you, being a writer, my husband is a lawyer and he's constantly saying, I would never be a writer. Like that's the hardest career. It is, it's really hard. Writing books is hard for so many reasons, but finishing when things aren't working, you have my sympathy. I'm there with you right now.
So I really like that you said that teacher, you would say one thing and writer, you would say something different. And so maybe just this fun thing that I thought of is, what is the advice that teacher you or other teachers of writing give that you think people should ignore?
That's a great question. Because I'm thinking of things that I know that I like. What are things that I would ignore? Oh, I would ignore the idea that you're either a plotter or a pantser. That's a weird idea that people have, where they say, well, you'll have to figure out, maybe you're a plotter, maybe you plot your books out, or maybe you write by the seat of your pants. No, I've never written a book where I was one or the other. Sometimes I need some organization while I'm improvising, so and the other thing I would say, and this is on the opposite side of that, but it's one of my favorite writing lessons. Sometimes I treat this like a parlor game, like I'm going to make up lessons for myself because I don't know what's going to work, but so I give myself exercises, and I think that's a lot of fun, and I think that we can all do that. One thing I do with every book I write, it was a thing I made up years ago, was I have a friend who I got my MFA with, and she gets a letter from every character that in my books, every main character. I write her, and the way I do it is I start by writing not in the voice because I'm not there, but somewhere along the way the voice clicks in. And it's such an important, powerful tool that nobody taught me. We teach ourselves. So empower yourself to figure out for yourself what works.
I like that a lot, as even just a writing prompt, like have your characters write a letter, and it helps you as a writer to work into their voices. And I think that could work for any genre, honestly. Like I'm imagining, like, what if a poem wrote a letter to somebody? Like how could that,
Love that.
help me revise it? I like that a lot.
Very interesting idea. Yeah. Cool. We've done something today. We've created something.
Hey, so we don't have any more questions, but if there's anything you'd like to leave our participants with, I will tell you that a lot of the attendees right now are students in our creative writing classes. So if there's anything that you would like to leave them or us with, we would appreciate it.
I guess I would just say, it's not about false confidence, because you don't want that. You want to learn how to be a writer. There is craft here to be learned. But beyond that, believe in your voice. In some ways, your voice is you, and there's no way around that. And if anyone is trying to change your voice, don't let that happen. It's about finding the best way to express what is real and what is you. So that's the only thing. I guess that's what I would say. It's not the most astute of things I could have said, but that's what I'm going with.
That's good. Thank you. Thank you very, very much.